Hey guys, tonight we're heading straight into the flickering dusk of a West African village clearing, where you can already hear the slow, heartbeat thump of drums under a sky bruised purple. Smoke drifts from cooking fires. Kids yawn, pretending they're not desperate to stay up all night. You shift on the worn mat they gave you, the air a little cooler now, but still clinging like damp cloth. You can practically smell the red dust, feel the hush settle over the gathering as the griots begin to chant. One small warning, you probably won't survive this if you need to be up early tomorrow. These stories last until sunrise, with no apology and no bathroom break sign. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sink into the ground a little more. The drummer's hands seem to glow in the firelight. The rhythm is hypnotic, soft, then sharp, as if the forest itself were replying. A griot in indigo robes clears his throat, and the crowd hushes. His voice is low, the sort that seems to rise from the dust itself, telling you it was here long before you and will keep talking when you're gone. You glance around, spotting elders who have heard this 100 times and still listen as if it's new. That's the power here. This isn't just entertainment, it's how the past survives. Your own phone flashlight feels almost rude in your pocket. Imagine trying to record it, these words don't want to be trapped in glass screens. Historians still argue whether the earliest griots were royal advisors or simply village elders who remembered things better than others. You can practically see both roles in this old man's eyes, half smile, half warning. He starts naming ancestors, like they're stepping out of the dark to listen. A baby cries. No one shushes them. The story wraps around the noise like water around a stone. You're struck by the detail, lineage stretching back centuries. A mainstream historical fact drops with all the weight of truth. Griots in the Mali Empire were known to recite entire dynastic genealogies from memory, performing for hours without a single mistake. You wonder if you could even recite your own grandparents' full names without checking Facebook. The fire pops. A little boy jumps. The griot doesn't miss a beat. He's telling the founding of the village, a hero who tricked a river spirit for fertile land. But in the same breath, he slips in a wry aside about those who believed the spirit was just lazy. That gets a small, knowing laugh from the front row. You breathe in the scent of roasting maize, gritty and sweet. The dust glows red under the moon, turning every face to a mask. There's a lull as the drummer changes rhythm, slower now, drawing you deeper. Here's the quirky bit, you learn that in some communities, griots were not allowed to marry outside their caste, because marrying outside memory was thought to ruin the lineage of knowledge. It's a rule you can't imagine enforcing on Tinder. The drums pick up again. The words grow faster. The griot says your name, well, not your name exactly, but stranger who watches, and the entire crowd laughs as if you've been caught. You feel seen and safe, part of the ritual, even if you're thousands of miles away listening on your phone. The old man leans forward, the firelight catching on sweat and age. He tells you softly, these stories only live if you help carry them. No one owns them. But everyone owes them something. You feel your eyelids grow heavy, but the rhythm keeps you awake, tapping on your spine. Historians still argue whether this art form was purely African in origin or influenced by Arabic poetic traditions brought by trade. He doesn't care. He's telling it the way his father did. You hear camels in the words, desert winds in the pauses, river crossings in the claps of his hands. You get the sense that if you dozed right now, you'd dream in these stories. They're not frozen artifacts in a museum, they're living things, with teeth and jokes and quiet prayers. He lets the words fade, gestures for the drummers to hush. You feel the night press in around you. For one long moment, no one says anything. Even the crickets seem to listen. You exhale, trying not to break the spell. Somewhere in the darkness, a second griot clears his throat to begin. But you'll have to keep listening. The night is young, and the stories are older than time. The second griot's voice is different, grainier, a little playful, as if the firelight itself is chuckling along with him. You feel the hush shift, the listeners adjusting on mats, bare feet sliding over packed earth. He starts without preamble, calling you all witnesses, reminding you that in this circle, every ear is a contract. He's the griot who remembers too much. His head is crammed with lineage lists, proverbs, curses, blessings, battles. You can't help imagining him as a living USB stick, except you wouldn't dare unplug him mid-sentence. He begins with the first ancestor to claim the soil, describing how they cut paths through grass so tall it hissed when you walked. You almost hear it in the wind. There's a historical fact in his tale that seems to drift into the night air. The ancient Mali and Songhai courts maintained formal positions for griots who were official chroniclers and advisors. You realize their words shaped kings. But he lowers his voice now, letting the silence stretch. This is where the real work happens, no fancy politics, just memory. He recites an unbroken chain of names, so many you feel your brain slipping off them like water on stone. That's the point. It's not for you to remember, it's for him never to forget. Someone coughs. He glances at them, eyes twinkling, and improvises a rhyme about coughing before wisdom hits you. The crowd chuckles, and the mood relaxes again. You think about how Western historians once dismissed oral history as unreliable, only for entire dynasties to prove their scribes wrong with a single griot's correction. Historians still argue whether oral tradition can be as precise as writing. But tonight, this man is a library in motion. He describes training, endless repetition under a brutal sun, elders correcting every pause. A young griot might have to recite entire genealogies before being allowed to perform publicly. The quirky fact hits you, some griots were famous for composing roasts in song, gently mocking their patrons until they paid better. Even in feudal Africa, tipping culture was strong. His voice rises. You hear pride, not arrogance. He's listing victories, tribal alliances, markets established with words alone, where trade routes curved because treaties were sung before they were written. You see nods in the crowd, old men remembering negotiations they watched in their youth. The drummers pick up a slow heartbeat rhythm, and he rides it like a tide. He's not even looking at the fire anymore, his eyes seem to stare straight at you. You feel pinned, in a good way. Like you can't look away. He shifts tone suddenly, solemn. There's a story about a broken promise that led to bloodshed. He lists all the names of the fallen, and the silence grows thick. This isn't myth, this is family history. People cough, shuffle, but no one dares break the hush. You feel it too, a kind of grief that isn't yours but is loaned to you for safekeeping. He leans back, letting the drum stop completely. There's no sound but crackling embers. He nods to the drummer to resume, and the rhythm restarts at half speed, drawing the listeners back from their thoughts. He's smiling now, voice teasing. He talks about the lazy apprentice who forgot half the lineage and claimed it was lost to time. There's laughter, but it's knowing laughter. Everyone remembers being that apprentice in some part of life. Then he dips into proverb, and your ears prick up, a tree with deep roots fears no wind. You roll it around in your mind, realizing how much these performances are education, therapy, entertainment, and social glue all at once. Historians still argue whether the griot tradition was designed primarily to serve rulers or the people. But here, listening, you suspect it's both and neither. It's a duty you can't easily categorize. He launches into a list of ancient laws, some very serious, others hilariously petty. Like the one about fines for insulting someone's cooking. You imagine standing before a chief trying to explain that, and can't help but chuckle. The griot winks at someone in the front, proving even the oldest laws had loopholes. He slows again. He's teaching. Not just facts, but how to listen. He asks the crowd questions, and they answer back, in a slow, sing-song call and response that makes you want to join in. He corrects them gently when they get it wrong, weaving the answer into a story about a trader who lied about his wares and ended up selling his own sandals. Your legs are falling asleep, but your mind is wide awake. You feel the energy in the clearing shift as the old griot grows quiet. He's spent, you can tell. The crowd is still. The drums hush. He leans forward one last time, voice husky with smoke and age. If you forget, he says softly, I must speak twice as long. The crowd groans in mock terror. He grins, revealing surprisingly good teeth for someone who's probably older than the baobab behind him. You notice the fires burned low, casting taller, stranger shadows. The night isn't even halfway done. Another griot is preparing to speak, humming to himself as he tunes an ancient instrument in the darkness. You exhale, shifting your weight, ready to keep listening. Because this is just the beginning. The hum of anticipation settles over the crowd as the third griot tunes his instrument, a slim, carved lute with strings that gleam like spider silk in the firelight. He plucks it once. The note seems to hang in the air, vibrating against your chest. You shiver despite the heat. You lean forward unconsciously, as does everyone else. He clears his throat, waits, lets the silence build. Then he begins to speak in a rhythmic cadence that demands an answer. He intones, eyes scanning the audience. They respond, dozens of voices rising and falling together like one giant sleepy beast. Call and response. It's not optional. It's glue. You add your own quiet under your breath, pretending you're there. Because tonight, you are. The griot smiles. This is the part you realize is designed to keep you awake even as your eyelids grow heavy. If you don't respond, he'll tease you mercilessly. There's no passive listening here. He strums the lute, then launches into a lineage, not of people this time, but of stories themselves. He talks about how tales travel with the traders, morph with the accents of strangers, grow new limbs and teeth in every village. Historians still argue whether these storytelling patterns are indigenous or imported from North African and Middle Eastern influences along trade routes, but tonight it doesn't matter. The story belongs to everyone in the circle. He describes the rhythm of a proper session. The audience must interrupt. Must correct him if he leaves out a detail. Must echo his words so they live in many mouths at once. He tests them. He says the man who hunted, and the audience shouts, and lost, and laughs at themselves. You smile, imagining yourself there, forced to play along, even if you're so tired your head wobbles. Mainstream historical fact? The call and response form didn't just survive in Africa. It crossed oceans with enslaved people and shaped music from gospel to blues to hip-hop. You hear it in his words like an ancestor's heartbeat under modern bass. The griot plays a scale on his lute. It's a strange, modal scale that doesn't quite fit your Western-trained ear. He jokes about the notes that hide in the cracks, saying he learned them from a spirit under a waterfall. A kid gasps in the front row. The adults chuckle and nod. He describes a time he lost his voice entirely, struck dumb by illness, and couldn't respond to his own students. He mimics the croak he used to have, making the front row howl with laughter. The quirky tidbit here? Some communities believed that losing your voice meant the ancestors were mad you hadn't told their stories often enough. Talk about performance anxiety. The call and response intensifies. He calls out insults in jest, and they volley them back. Lazy ears, he shouts. Empty mouth, they return. It's not just banter, it's proof they're awake, that the old knowledge is still alive enough to sass back. You close your eyes, swaying with the rhythm. You don't even realize you're mumbling responses under your breath until you catch yourself. Historians still argue whether griots truly controlled history or simply reflected the consensus of their patrons. But here you see the subversive truth: by making the audience participate, they make everyone complicit in remembering. The griot lets the call and response fade to near silence, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He says there's a story no one is allowed to tell alone. He strums a soft chord and says it's coming later, if you last that long. He leans back, eyes gleaming. Your turn, he says. And the audience obediently starts reciting a proverb in unison. The mouth that eats does not forget. He nods solemnly, strums once, and lets the echo hang. You imagine trying this at home. Your friends would laugh you out of the living room. But here? It's a survival mechanism. Memory in the open air. The griot chuckles and says, "We've warmed you up. Now you're ready." He nods to someone behind him. A second musician starts tapping a carved drum, the sound somehow watery, as if played under a moonlit river. He closes with one final test. He sings a fragment of a story, leaving out a line. The audience pauses, then erupts in shouted corrections, each one slightly different. He cackles, delighted. Good. It means the story is still alive. It's supposed to change. You feel your pulse slow. The tension in your shoulders drips away. The drumming turns gentle, hypnotic. The griot hums along softly. For a moment, it seems like everyone might drift off. But he doesn't let you go. He raises his voice one last time, low and amused. If you fall asleep now, you'll wake up with a goat's ears. Laughter ripples through the crowd. The night air cools your cheeks. And you know there's no way you're stopping yet. The next voice is already clearing their throat, ready to take you deeper into the endless dark. The next voice that emerges is older still, as cracked as dry earth but deeper, too, like it's rising from a well. You shift in your imaginary seat, spine straightening even though your eyes droop. Everyone in the circle knows this griot. He's the one who won't let you off easy. He doesn't greet anyone. He just starts. You want history, he growls, making the kids flinch and the adults grin. Fine. You'll get it. He begins by describing the social role of the griot in excruciating detail, leaving no romantic illusion unpicked. They weren't just storytellers. They were negotiators, diplomats, genealogists, satirists, and sometimes spies. Mainstream historical fact? In many Mande-speaking societies, a griot family was bound in patronage to a noble family across generations. This wasn't just friendship, it was obligation. Your kids inherited your patrons, along with your stories. The old man leans forward, eyes gleaming. He tells you flatly that griots were often seen as dangerous. Why? Because they remembered debts. He lists them now: bride price unpaid, treaty broken, cattle stolen. His voice a litany of petty crimes and major betrayals. You can see the audience shift uncomfortably. This is the truth-teller part of the griot's art, the unfun uncle at Thanksgiving who won't let anyone forget that time you set the shed on fire. He pauses, then cracks a crooked smile. You think writing is safe? The paper doesn't answer back when you lie. The crowd chuckles. You do too. He taps his staff on the ground for emphasis. Dust rises, caught in the firelight. He tells a quick story of the griot who refused to perform at a wedding until the groom paid a long-forgotten debt to his grandfather. The elders had to mediate, the entire village watching. The quirky tidbit? Sometimes a griot would perform the insult as song, adding verses until the debt was paid in sheer embarrassment. Historians still argue whether these confrontations were acts of social justice or just personal gain. He scoffs at that. Ask the one who had to pay, he mutters. His tone softens. He begins to chant names again. But these aren't noble warriors or famous merchants. These aren't the ones who listened. He insists that every storyteller needs an audience willing to hold the memory with them. The crowd hums in agreement. You hear it too, in your own breath. He tells you to look at the stars above you, and you do, even from your bed. He says each star is a name. That every time a story is told, another light joins them. He calls storytelling the oldest form of astronomy, mapping human lives in constellations no one can erase. There's a hush. The fire pops. He breaks it deliberately with a rude noise in his throat. Don't get sentimental, he says. If you forget the details, you ruin the whole thing. He points at a child in the front row and says, "Repeat what I said." The kid stammers. The crowd erupts in laughter, not unkind, but loud enough to make your heart race. He nods, satisfied. Now he recounts a treaty negotiation that hinged on a griot's perfect recall of an ancestor's promise. He describes the scene in painful detail: the heat, the flies, the sweat running down everyone's back, the drumming in the distance to keep people awake. You're there, blinking in the glare. You feel your clothes stick to you. But there's also that sly griot humor. He says one chief was so bored by the recitation that he fell asleep and snored so loudly it almost killed the deal. They had to prod him awake with a stick. The crowd howls. He uses that laughter to talk about the danger of forgetting. Wars have started because someone lied about a promise. Livelihoods lost because a debt was hidden. Memory is work, he says, voice hard. And work is never free. The drummers add a slow, ominous beat. The old man paces, staff thumping. He shifts to describing how griots trained. He says you'd have to wake up before the sun, run miles while reciting names, practice improvising insults until your tongue bled. He claims, only half joking, that the ancestors would visit your dreams to correct your mistakes. Quirky tidbit? Some griots supposedly slept in special positions so they wouldn't forget their lines, on their side with a hand over their ear, trapping the words inside. The old man mimes this now, curling on the ground in the dust. The kids squeal in delight. Historians still argue whether griot schools were formal institutions or family traditions. He says it doesn't matter. The only diploma you got was the crowd's approval. He slows again. His eyes flick across the crowd. If you forget, he repeats quietly, then the lie wins. He lets that hang. Then he slams his staff one last time. Enough. Next voice. He sits heavily, wiping sweat from his brow. The firelight paints his face in lines and hollows. He's spent, but there's a satisfaction in his grin. You feel it too, deep in your chest. The relief of having told the truth, even if no one thanked you for it. The next griot clears her throat, and you can tell already her style will be very different. But you're not going anywhere. After all, you wouldn't want the lie to win. The voice that rises next is lighter, almost teasing, as if she's deliberately brushing away the heavy dust the old man left behind. You hear her tapping something small and metallic, maybe a bracelet against a good drum. The sound is quick, delicate, designed to rouse anyone drifting off. You shift with the rest of the crowd, shaking off that grim feeling. She lets the silence stretch, then coughs politely, waiting until every eye is on her. Now that he's scared you stiff, she says, let's remember why we stay up all night. She smiles, voice dropping conspiratorially. It's for the drama. A ripple of laughter moves through the circle. You grin in the dark. She begins to paint a vivid picture of these marathon storytelling sessions, where no one dares sleep first for fear of missing the juiciest part. She says it's like the world's oldest soap opera. Mainstream historical fact? Across West Africa, all-night storytelling served not just as entertainment but as education. It was the way genealogies were preserved, disputes were resolved, and moral lessons embedded in the culture, often with memorable drama and humor. She waggles a finger at the kids in the front. But don't think you could just sit there quietly. Oh no. You'd get called on to finish the line if you looked sleepy. She demonstrates, flicking her wrist toward a boy who nearly jumps. The crowd roars with laughter. She then describes the typical setup. Mats laid out, gourds of water passed around, the smell of roasted groundnuts filling the air, the fire casting long dancing shadows that make every ghost story 10 times scarier. Quirky tidbit? She claims some griots would deliberately wait until after midnight to tell the forbidden tales, the ones full of sly insults or bawdy jokes about local leaders. Historians still argue whether these midnight sessions served as controlled resistance or just naughty fun. She hums a short tune. It's a children's call and response she learned at age 5, but she says even the elders have to answer. She tests the crowd. The hare is clever, she calls. But the tortoise remembers, they shout back. You try it too, under your breath, enjoying how the words feel in your mouth. She smiles, satisfied. Now she spins a story about a cunning trickster who swaps his baby for a goat to fool a bride's family, with each twist punctuated by the crowd's collective gasp. She says griots prided themselves on making people forget the hour, so dawn would surprise you. She points out a man in the audience who's pretending not to laugh, scolding him gently. You'll be the first to snore, she warns, and the audience hoots with glee. She leans forward, voice dropping. You think it's easy? Try talking for 6 hours straight. With no notes. With 20 elders waiting to catch your lie. With children repeating every insult you make for the next week. She waves a hand airily. And you have to be funny or they'll walk away. Historians still argue whether these sessions were formal education or just community bonding. She shrugs. Both, she says. Life is messy. She begins describing the etiquette of listening. How you can't interrupt except at the right moments. How elders nod when you get it right. How even the quiet ones have to hum agreement so the griot knows they're awake. She jokes about the one time she lost her voice mid-session and had to whisper her insults. The audience had to lean so close they nearly fell into the fire. She slaps her drum lightly to get everyone's attention. Because that's the trick, right, she says. You want to sleep. But you can't. Not yet. There's always one more turn, one more tale. She describes the way these sessions help people cope with fear. That by telling ghost stories, they rob the monsters of power. That by mocking greedy chiefs in coded insults, they keep them humble. She rattles her bracelets like wind chimes. You can't get that from a book, she says with gentle disdain. A book doesn't laugh when you get it wrong. You imagine the fire crackling. The warm bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder. The smell of smoke in your hair. You're nodding along, eyelids drooping, but she won't let you go yet. She leans back on her elbows, looking at the stars. You think they're quiet? She asks. Listen. Even the stars are telling stories tonight. They just speak too slow for you to hear. The crowd sighs. She sighs too. But that's fine, she adds brightly. We've got all night. She waits until the silence is absolute. Then, with a mischievous glint in her eye, she turns to the next griot and says, your turn to keep them awake. You smile, knowing you're not going anywhere. After all, you don't want to be the first to snore. The next griot doesn't even clear his throat. He simply starts speaking in a low, steady voice that wraps around you like the smoke from the fire. You blink, your eyelids heavy, but his words grip you all the same. He doesn't tell you to hush, you hush because you can feel this is going to be different. He speaks of migration. Of journeys that don't end in a single night. You want to understand why we stay up telling stories, he says, voice deep as a drumbeat. Because we've been walking for centuries. He describes families loading everything onto carts or donkeys. Entire lineages on the move because of drought, war, trade, or prophecy. He says you can't carry everything, so you carry the stories. Mainstream historical fact? The Great West African migrations, including those driven by desertification and the spread of agriculture, reshaped societies over centuries, creating linguistic ties and rivalries that still persist. He gestures expansively, eyes catching the firelight. He describes the Sahel's open grasslands. The sudden line of the desert. The green hush of the forest beyond. He says you can feel the land change under your feet. You shift on your mat, imagining sand crunching in your teeth. He points at a boy and asks, how do you remember where the wells are? Where the thorns are sharpest? You sing it. He breaks into a simple traveling chant, low and repetitive. The crowd hums along. He says that these all-night sessions are practice for remembering on the move. That if you can't stay awake for one night, you can't stay alive on a 100-mile journey. Quirky tidbit? He says some groups train children to remember dozens of place names in order by making them dance in patterns that traced the roots on the ground. He mimes a footstep dance, slow and deliberate. The kids giggle, trying to follow. Historians still argue whether these migrations were peaceful expansions or violent displacements. He shrugs. Depends which side you're on, he says quietly. He describes traders who knew 100 languages by ear but claimed to know none so they could feign ignorance in tough negotiations. He talks about griots hired to travel with caravans, both to entertain and to keep everyone honest about the debts owed at each stop. He tells of the salt caravans. You imagine the long camel lines, the jingling bells in the night. He says the desert can be so silent you can hear the wind scrape the stars. You shiver under your blanket. He describes women with babies strapped to their backs, whispering the family lineage so the infant would know their ancestors before they could even speak. He claims, only half-jokingly, that's why babies sleep so soundly on the trail, the stories give them courage. The crowd chuckles, and you smile, eyes half-closed. He asks the audience if they remember any of their own family's migration stories. The older ones nod solemnly. The younger ones look away, embarrassed they don't know. He leans forward, voice turning intimate. Ask them, he says. Tomorrow. Ask them before they forget. He raises one eyebrow. Because if they forget, it's your fault. He lets the guilt hang there, sweet as honey but sticky. Then he softens, describing a night on the savannah when the stars are so bright you can see the road ahead without a torch. He says that's when the griot tells the longest stories, to keep travelers awake so they don't fall asleep and let the camels wander off. He adds a sly grin. Camels love to gossip. They'll walk off to share your secrets with the next caravan. The audience laughs, the tension easing. He tells a quick story about a caravan leader who tried to cheat his men out of their salt share, only for the griot to compose a song about his stinginess that spread from oasis to oasis until he had to double everyone's pay just to hush it up. Historians still argue whether griots were paid more as entertainers or as enforcers of moral debts. He says it doesn't matter. We got paid, he adds with a smirk. He pauses, letting the drumming pick up. He describes falling asleep to the rhythmic thump of camel feet. How even the snores of travelers would line up with the beat. He says that in the morning, the words you heard all night would be waiting on your tongue. He tells the audience they're not just listening tonight, they're migrating too. Through time. Through memory. He finishes with a warning. Rest if you must, he says, eyes glinting, but don't you dare forget the road. He sits down, folding his legs carefully, the hush settling over the crowd. You pull your blanket tighter, grateful for the warmth. Your head swims with roads, stars, salt, and that chant you can't quite shake. And you know the next voice will take you even further. The fire crackles, sending little sparks twisting into the night. You shift on your mat, expecting the next griot to launch right in with another migration story, but she surprises you. She's older, with a voice like worn cloth, soft but durable. She waits so long that you almost think she's fallen asleep herself. Then she begins humming. Low. Slow. Familiar in a way you can't place. People hush, leaning forward. She doesn't explain it at first. Just lets the hum spread until everyone is doing it. Even you. It's like bees in a hive, warm, close, communal. When she speaks, she tells you you're humming history itself. Mainstream historical fact? Many West African storytelling traditions rely on call and response songs or chants that serve as memory aids for genealogies, proverbs, and laws. She laughs softly. You thought these stories were just words, she asks. No. They're music you can't forget. She starts listing proverbs, one after another, in a rhythm that feels like a drumbeat even without an instrument. The river does not drink its own water. Even the lion needs the mouse to clean his teeth. You find yourself repeating them under your breath. She teases you gently. Don't mumble. Speak it clear. That's how you learn it. Quirky tidbit? She says some villages held literal storytelling competitions judged like wrestling matches. The victor wasn't the strongest, but the one who could make the crowd roar or weep or beg for more. She leans in, pretending to flex a skinny arm. Look at me. Champion twice. The crowd bursts out laughing. She describes a long ago night when she forgot the ending of a crucial genealogy and the elders made her sit in silence for an hour in front of everyone until she could remember. She says it was the worst punishment because even her enemies pitied her. You squirm, embarrassed on her behalf despite the years. Historians still argue whether these performative contests were purely entertainment or subtle means of enforcing social cohesion and hierarchy. She just smirks. As if there's a difference. She gestures at the fire, asking if you see the shape in the flames. She says that's the trick of a good griot, to see a shape where there's only heat and light and convince everyone else it's there too. She holds up her fingers. This many words, this many breaths, and you can make them see an elephant. She snaps them. Or a ghost. The crowd jumps slightly. You chuckle nervously. She sways in place, telling you how the words have to be paced so the audience doesn't drift off too soon, but can't leave at dawn without remembering something important. You think we want you to sleep, she says with mock offense. We want you to dream. She explains that dreamlike pacing is part of the art, slowing down, repeating, humming. A trick to sink the lesson deeper than wakefulness. She has everyone hum again. This time she walks around the circle, checking people's posture. She taps one kid on the forehead when he slouches. Don't sleep on my time. The kid yelps, everyone laughs, but he straightens up. She keeps telling proverbs, folding them into a story about two rival griots who insulted each other so beautifully that the entire village stayed up for 3 nights just to hear the next comeback. One of them, she claims, once compared the other's singing voice to a frog with a stomachache. You snort. So does half the crowd. She smiles slyly. That's culture. Remember it. She grows quiet again. Then, so softly you almost miss it, she recites a list of clan names and praise titles. She says these are the keys to opening people's hearts. Call them by their true names, she whispers, and they will tell you everything. She describes being invited to a wedding to recite these names and how even the most hard-faced uncle wept openly when he heard his grandmother's praise name. She calls out someone in the audience, an older man, and gives his mother's clan name with such reverence he actually wipes a tear. Stories aren't just for fun, she says. They are the glue. Historians still argue whether these names and titles are accurate records or poetic inventions. She shrugs. It doesn't matter if they're true. They're real. She leans close to the fire, letting the glow catch her face. We tell you these things so you don't forget you belong somewhere. She taps her chest. You're not just a name. You're a story someone risked their voice to tell. The silence after is thick, heavy, comfortable. She hums again, softer now. And this time, even the most restless kids don't resist. They hum with her until the next griot clears his throat, ready to take over. You lean back on your mat, that warm vibration still in your bones. The firelight flickers as the next griot steps forward, a young man, quieter than the last, with eyes like twilight shadows. He doesn't rush. Instead, he lets the silence stretch just long enough for you to notice the cool night air settling in. He leans forward, voice low and steady. Now, let me tell you about the gifts the ancestors left us, not in gold or land, but in words and ways. You picture a village waking at dawn, children chasing chickens, women grinding millet, men preparing for the day's market. But behind the scenes, he says, the real treasures were the stories. They carried wisdom about survival, nature, and respect for the unseen. Mainstream historical fact? Oral traditions in West Africa often include detailed ecological knowledge, guiding communities on when to plant, harvest, or avoid certain areas during dangerous seasons. These narratives were vital for survival. He tells of the Mande people's epic poem, the Sundiata, which not only recounts the rise of a king but also encodes agricultural calendars and social laws. Quirky tidbit? He explains that some stories included secret codes, rhythms or repeated words, that only insiders could understand, like a password whispered through generations. He chuckles, if you didn't get it, you might get invited to a story, but you wouldn't get the meaning. Historians still argue whether these secret codes were deliberate or developed organically as stories evolved. He describes how storytellers used mimicry and props, sticks for swords, leaves for crowns, to animate tales, making them vivid enough to almost see. You imagine the crack of a stick, the rustle of leaves, the sparkle in the griot's eyes as he transforms words into scenes. He tells of a festival where the best storytellers competed, judged by their skill in weaving everyday wisdom into tales of heroes and spirits. The winner was awarded a carved calabash filled with the finest honey. The crowd murmurs appreciatively. He shares a funny story about a griot who forgot the right words mid-performance and improvised an entire dialogue between two trees arguing about which one had better roots. The audience was so entertained they asked for an encore. You laugh quietly, imagining the trees trading insults. He talks about how stories serve as gentle reminders, lessons disguised as entertainment. Like when the trickster figure is caught cheating but uses clever words to escape punishment. He warns you, don't be fooled. The trickster is you and me, sometimes. You nod, feeling the truth settle in with the warmth of the fire. He leans back, eyes twinkling. Remember, stories aren't just for listening, they're for learning who you are. The night hums softly as he passes the tale on, and you realize you're part of the long chain stretching back through time, linked by the soft rhythm of words spoken beneath the stars. The fire's warmth fades a little as the night deepens, but the circle tightens, drawing you closer in. This griot, a woman with silver-streaked hair and a voice like velvet, speaks slower, as if she's weaving a dream you don't quite want to wake from. She begins by describing the art of patience, the way stories are told not just for the telling, but for the waiting between words, the pauses that let meaning sink in like rain soaking earth. You feel the lull, your breath slowing to match her rhythm. Mainstream historical fact? The art of storytelling in many West African cultures emphasizes timing and pauses as crucial, almost sacred, parts of the narrative, allowing listeners to reflect and internalize lessons deeply. She shares a tale of a king whose entire court fell asleep during a long, dry spell, and how the griot saved the day by telling a story so gentle and slow that the king's daughter awoke and inspired a new season of growth. Quirky tidbit? She says some storytellers used the sound of their own heartbeat to time their tales, whispering stories so slow they matched their pulse, lulling listeners into a meditative state. Historians still argue whether this was a deliberate method or a natural effect of calm, focused narration. She invites you to imagine the slow, steady thump of a drum beneath the story's surface, marking time like a heartbeat. You feel it resonate in your chest. She tells of storytellers who used herbal teas to calm their voices before performances, blending flavors known to soothe throat and mind, lemongrass, hibiscus, and baobab. You can almost taste the warm, tart brew. She describes the slow unfurling of a story like a folded cloth, each layer revealing more color, more texture, until you're wrapped in the warmth of the narrative itself. She whispers that in the quiet spaces, you find the story's true magic, an invitation to rest, to dream, to remember. The crowd exhales collectively, a soft breath that seems to settle dust and calm restless thoughts. She closes with a gentle reminder, sometimes the best story is the one that lets you drift, the one that lets your mind wander beyond the words. And just like that, you feel the edges of sleep curling around you, soft and inviting, as her voice fades into the crackling fire. The fire crackles softly, and a new voice rises from the shadows, a young griot with a warm, lilting tone, carrying a quiet excitement as if sharing a secret meant only for you. He begins by inviting you to journey into the world of ancient West African music and its connection to storytelling, where melodies and words blend to carry history across generations. You imagine the gentle strumming of a kora, its strings vibrating beneath the fingertips of a skilled player, weaving melodies that rise and fall like the rhythm of a slow river. He tells you that the music isn't just background. It's part of the story itself, shaping mood, guiding attention, and soothing restless minds. Mainstream historical fact? The kora, a 21-string harp lute, has been a central instrument in Mande storytelling traditions for centuries, accompanying epic tales and genealogies with its hypnotic sound. He shares a quirky tidbit about the naming of certain melodies. Some are said to be inspired by animal calls, like the plaintive cry of a night bird or the gentle rustle of a fox's tail brushing through dry leaves. You chuckle softly, picturing a griot mimicking these sounds mid-performance, much to the delight of the crowd. Historians still argue whether these musical imitations were originally meant as literal representations or symbolic references, layered with meaning known only to insiders. He describes how certain rhythms mimic natural phenomena, the pulse of rain, the steady march of ants, or the sway of tall grasses in the breeze. This connection to the environment deepens the listener's immersion, helping them drift gently into the narrative's embrace. He pauses, inviting you to close your eyes and feel the music's flow, imagining each note as a soft ripple across a calm pond, carrying stories on its surface. He recounts a festival where griots competed not just on storytelling, but on their ability to blend words and music seamlessly, their performances judged by elders who valued subtlety over spectacle. You smile, imagining the gentle competition, where a whispered line or a delicate chord could win the crowd's quiet admiration. He ends by reminding you that music and story together are a lullaby passed down through time, meant to comfort, teach, and guide, a sacred tradition meant to carry you softly into sleep. The fire dips low as the night deepens further, and the griot who steps forward carries a calm authority. She begins to speak of the sacred role of animals in West African storytelling traditions, not just as characters but as symbols, teachers, and companions on the journey through life and memory. You picture a leopard's sleek form slipping silently through the underbrush, a clever hare darting between trees, and a wise tortoise slowly making his way across the land. She says these animals appear again and again, each embodying traits the storyteller wants you to understand: cunning, patience, resilience. Mainstream historical fact? Many West African tales feature animal tricksters like Anansi the spider or the hare, figures who use wit and humor to outsmart stronger opponents, often teaching lessons about human nature and survival. She shares a quirky detail, that in some villages, children were encouraged to imitate the animals from stories during play, practicing the movements and sounds to better remember the lessons embedded in the tales. You imagine a circle of children hopping and scampering, their laughter mixing with the night air. Historians still debate whether these animal stories originated as entertainment, moral instruction, or coded communication among communities. She tells you that storytellers sometimes adjusted their animal characters depending on the audience, choosing traits that would resonate most with listeners' experiences and environments. You feel a quiet warmth as she recites a story about a tortoise who, slow and steady, outwits a boastful hare, not with speed, but with clever thinking and patience. The crowd chuckles softly at the hare's frustration, a familiar tale retold anew beneath the stars. She explains that these stories serve as gentle reminders of the values that hold communities together, and that the animals are more than metaphors, they are mirrors reflecting human strengths and flaws. She concludes by urging you to consider the animals around you are not just as creatures of the wild, but as carriers of ancient wisdom, whispering their lessons softly through time. The night feels a little softer, the shadows a little friendlier, as her voice trails off and the next story begins to stir. The night air cools further, but the circle tightens, and a gentle voice rises, this time weaving tales of ancient West African gardens, lush spaces where plants and people grew together in quiet harmony. You find yourself imagining rich earth under your fingers, the sweet scent of blooming flowers, and the soft rustle of leaves as stories bloom alongside them. She tells you that these gardens weren't just for food or medicine, they were living libraries, each plant carrying a story, a purpose, a history. You feel the damp soil and hear the gentle drip of water, as if the garden itself is breathing. Mainstream historical fact? Traditional West African gardens often incorporated medicinal and culinary plants, reflecting deep ecological knowledge passed down through generations via oral traditions. She shares a quirky detail about the talking trees of some villages, trees believed to hold the voices of ancestors, whose leaves rustled in special patterns that skilled storytellers interpreted like secret messages. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were literal or metaphorical expressions of the connection between people and their environment. She describes how garden gatherings became storytelling sessions, with elders and children sharing tales beneath shade trees, teaching respect for nature and community. You picture a child tracing the veins of a leaf, learning the story it carries, a tale of healing, growth, or protection. She softly recites a tale of a plant that once saved a village from illness, its discovery celebrated with song and story that echoes through time. You feel a calm warmth settle over you, like the garden's gentle embrace. She finishes by inviting you to imagine yourself walking slowly through such a garden, each step a story unfolding beneath your feet, every leaf a whisper waiting to be heard. The fire dims further, and the night's rhythm slows as the stories and the earth become one, lulling you gently onward. The circle's glow softens, and the next storyteller, an elderly man with a voice roughened by years yet tender in tone, leans in to share tales about ancient West African markets, the bustling centers not just of trade, but of culture, gossip, and quiet exchanges that shaped communities. You can almost hear the clink of pottery, the chatter of vendors, the mingling scents of spices and fresh earth. He tells you that markets were lively stages where stories traveled faster than goods, weaving together traders, travelers, and townsfolk into a shared tapestry of experience. You imagine baskets piled high with yams and kola nuts, colorful cloths folded neatly, and children darting between stalls, their laughter adding melody to the hum. Mainstream historical fact? Markets like those in Timbuktu and Kano served as hubs for commerce and oral storytelling, helping to spread news and preserve history across vast regions. He shares a quirky tidbit that some traders carried the story bundles, special items wrapped in cloth, each with its own tale that they'd trade alongside their goods, passing on wisdom and jokes alike. Historians still debate how much these oral exchanges influence written records in the medieval Sahel, but the connection between commerce and storytelling is undeniable. He describes how certain market days became known for special storytelling performances, where griots and musicians would gather to entertain and educate, blending the practical with the poetic. You picture a storyteller pausing to mimic a haggling merchant, voices rising and falling in a playful banter that brings smiles all around. He notes that these market stories often included lessons on honesty, patience, and cleverness, values essential not just for trading, but for life. You feel the warmth of community in his words, the kind of quiet strength that comes from shared stories and shared lives. As his voice fades into the night, you sense the pulse of those ancient markets still beating softly beneath the stars. The fire's glow now gentle and low, the storyteller shifts to the theme of ancient West African crafts, hand-shaping clay, weaving cloth, and carving wood, each motion a ritual passed down through generations. You imagine the smooth curve of a pottery bowl, the soft scratch of weaving reeds, the subtle scent of fresh-cut timber mingling with earth and smoke. She explains how craft work was deeply connected to storytelling, each object held a narrative, a memory encoded in patterns, colors, or shapes, like a silent story whispered from maker to user. Mainstream historical fact? Many West African communities developed intricate craft traditions, such as the indigo dyeing of the Yoruba or the bronze casting of the Benin Kingdom, which embodied cultural values and histories. She shares a quirky detail, that some weavers hid tiny symbols or coded messages in their patterns, which only those in the know could read, like secret chapters in a woven book. Historians still argue whether these hidden symbols were deliberate or coincidental, but their presence adds a mysterious layer to the art. She describes the communal nature of craft making, with elders teaching young apprentices not just techniques but stories of origin and meaning, transforming workshops into living classrooms. You picture a young apprentice carefully threading a loom, fingers moving slowly as a story of a brave ancestor unfolds in the pattern beneath their hands. She tells a soft tale of a carved wooden mask used in ceremonies to invoke ancestral spirits, the mask's design said to carry a story of protection and guidance. You feel the warmth of hands passed down through time, crafting not only objects but connections, between past and present, maker and wearer, story and listener. She closes by inviting you to imagine running your fingers over a carved surface, feeling the stories beneath the grain, whispered gently in the night air. The fire dwindles, but the stories and their echoes linger softly, wrapping you in quiet comfort. The night deepens further, and the next griot's voice flows with the rhythm of ancient rivers, bringing stories of water and its role in West African life and storytelling. You imagine the gentle lap of river waves, the cool splash against sun-worn stones, and the sacred reverence given to rivers as sources of life and memory. He tells you that rivers were more than water, they were storytellers themselves, carrying tales downstream, linking villages and generations through their winding paths. You can almost hear the waters whisper, telling secrets to those who listen closely. Mainstream historical fact? Rivers like the Niger and Senegal have long been central to West African civilizations, serving as vital trade routes and inspiring countless stories and rituals. He shares a quirky tidbit about how some storytellers would mimic the sound of flowing water using their voices or simple instruments, blending natural sounds into their performances to create immersive experiences. Historians still debate whether these sound imitations were purely aesthetic or carried symbolic meanings connected to spiritual beliefs. He describes festivals held by riverbanks where storytelling, music, and dance combined in celebrations of life's ebb and flow, connecting people to nature and each other. You picture people gathered under moonlight, their shadows dancing on the water's surface as stories ripple like waves. He recounts a tale of a river spirit who tests a traveler's patience and kindness, rewarding those who listen with gifts of wisdom and guidance. You feel a calmness settle, as if the river's steady flow is carrying your thoughts gently downstream, washing away the day's clutter. He reminds you that water stories teach balance between action and rest, speaking and listening, holding on and letting go. The fire flickers low, and your eyelids grow heavy, soothed by the murmuring river and the griot's steady voice. The night air cools even more, and a soft-spoken griot steps forward to share stories about the stars, those distant lights that have guided travelers, inspired dreams, and sparked countless tales across West Africa's vast skies. You tilt your head back, imagining the shimmering constellations stretching overhead like a vast, silent tapestry. She tells you how different communities saw patterns in the stars, linking them to myths, ancestors, and seasonal cycles. You feel the stillness of the night, the gentle twinkle of distant fires burning light years away. Mainstream historical fact? Ancient West Africans used the stars for navigation, agriculture, and as calendars, embedding celestial knowledge into oral traditions. She shares a quirky detail about star stories told through song, where certain melodies mimic the rhythm of celestial movements, creating a lullaby for dreamers beneath the night sky. Historians still debate the precise origins of some star myths and how they spread across regions, but their soothing power remains undeniable. She describes how griots would point out stars during storytelling, connecting the earthly tales to their heavenly counterparts, encouraging listeners to imagine themselves part of a grand cosmic story. You imagine tracing the imaginary lines connecting stars, following a celestial path as her voice gently guides you through each tale. She recites a calming myth about a hunter who became a constellation, watching over his people from above, reminding them to stay brave and patient through dark nights. You feel the quiet comfort of knowing that, even far away, those stars watch over you too. She closes by inviting you to lie back and let the sky's vastness cradle your thoughts, each star a gentle guardian of sleep. The fire's warmth is now just a memory as you drift deeper into the night, carried by stories and starlight. The fire flickers low, and the storyteller's voice softens further as the focus shifts to ancient West African rituals surrounding dreams, those fleeting, mysterious visitors that slip through the night and carry messages or warnings. You feel the weight of quiet anticipation, like holding your breath just before sleep. She tells you that in many cultures across West Africa, dreams were sacred spaces where the living could touch ancestors or glimpse the future. You imagine a hush settling over the village as dream interpreters gather, sharing their insights under the silver glow of the moon. Mainstream historical fact? Dream interpretation has been an integral part of West African spiritual life, with specialized individuals often called upon to decode the meanings and guide communities. She shares a quirky detail about the use of dreamcatcher-like objects, woven charms or cloths hung near beds to encourage good dreams or trap troubling ones, blending practical care with spiritual belief. Historians still debate the extent to which these objects were widespread or varied between regions, but their presence is a fascinating part of the nighttime tradition. She describes how storytelling and dreams intertwine, with griot sometimes recounting stories inspired directly by dreams, blurring the line between waking and sleeping worlds. You picture yourself lying quietly, eyes closed, as stories and dreams weave together into a tapestry of comfort and mystery. She softly recites a tale of a dream messenger who guides a lost traveler back to their path, a story meant to reassure and inspire gentle trust in the night's mysteries. You feel a tender calm settle over you, a sense that whatever comes in sleep is part of a greater story, unfolding gently as you rest. Her voice lowers to a whisper as the fire fades to embers, the perfect lullaby to carry you deeper into your own dreams. The firelight is now faint, shadows stretching long and soft, as the next storyteller begins weaving tales about the role of food in West African storytelling nights, the tastes, smells, and rituals surrounding communal meals that fed both body and imagination. You can almost smell the warm aroma of spiced millet porridge, simmering peanuts, and fresh yams roasting over embers. She explains how food was never just sustenance, it was a symbol of connection, generosity, and tradition, with recipes passed down alongside stories that added flavor to the experience. You imagine a communal meal under the stars, where sharing food means sharing stories and memories. Mainstream historical fact? Traditional West African cuisines often combine staple crops with rich spices, herbs, and sauces, reflecting both local environments and trade influences. She shares a quirky tidbit about story spices, certain herbs believed to enhance memory or encourage storytelling, subtly woven into dishes to inspire the evening's narrators and listeners. Historians still debate whether these culinary beliefs had measurable effects or were charming traditions passed down to enrich social bonds. She describes the ritual of passing food around the circle, each bite accompanied by a story or a proverb, making the meal a multisensory lesson in culture and history. You picture a child eagerly passing a bowl, eyes wide with anticipation as a grandmother recounts a tale of the first harvest festival. She softly recounts a story of a humble stew that united rival villages, its recipe a secret treasure carried through generations as a symbol of peace and hope. You feel the warmth of the shared meal, the gentle clinking of spoons and bowls blending with laughter and quiet voices. The fire flickers one last time as the stories and scents mingle in the night air, wrapping you in a cozy embrace. The night feels almost timeless now, and the storyteller's voice grows hushed as they introduce tales of ancient West African festivals, celebrations where music, dance, and storytelling converge to mark seasons, rites of passage, and communal bonds. You can hear faint drums beating in the distance, the rhythm steady and inviting, drawing everyone closer. They describe how these festivals were vibrant theaters where history and myth blended, with dancers embodying legendary heroes and griots narrating epic sagas that stretched back through generations. You imagine colorful costumes swaying under moonlight, the scent of incense drifting through the warm night air. Mainstream historical fact? Many West African societies held elaborate festivals such as the Yoruba's Iyo and the Ashanti's Adi, integrating storytelling with ritual and celebration. The storyteller shares a quirky detail that some festivals featured playful storytelling contests where participants tried to outwit each other with clever twists and humorous asides, keeping audiences both engaged and entertained. Historians still debate how these contests influenced oral traditions and whether they shaped the evolution of storytelling styles over time. They recount a tale of a festival where a young griot's clever narrative saved his village from misunderstanding, turning potential conflict into laughter and unity. You feel the energy of the festival pulsing softly through the night, a reminder of the power of stories to connect, heal, and celebrate. The fire now a faint glow, the storyteller's voice slows to a gentle close, inviting you to carry the rhythm of the drums and the warmth of the night into your dreams. The fire has dwindled to glowing embers, and the storyteller's voice is a soothing murmur now, winding down the long night of tales with reflections on the enduring power of West African storytelling traditions. You feel the quiet weight of history settling softly around you, like a well-worn blanket. They remind you that these stories, passed from generation to generation, are more than entertainment. They are vessels of wisdom, identity, and resilience, carrying the voices of ancestors into the present and future. You imagine the circle growing smaller as listeners drift to sleep, their minds filled with images and sounds from the night's journey. Mainstream historical fact? Oral storytelling remains a vital cultural practice in many West African communities, adapting with time yet holding fast to its core role in preserving history and values. They share a gentle, quirky thought, that even now, some storytellers say the spirits of the old griots linger nearby, whispering new tales in the rustling leaves and night breezes. Historians still discuss how much of ancient lore survives today and what changes when stories shift from spoken word to written text or digital media. The storyteller's voice softens even further as they invite you to reflect on the stories you've heard tonight, carrying their calm, curious spirit with you into the quiet moments before sleep. You feel the night wrapping around you, the lingering warmth of community and shared stories easing you toward rest. Now, the night is truly still, the fire's last ember fading like the closing of a well-loved book, and your breath slows in sync with the gentle pulse of history's heartbeat. As your eyelids grow heavier and the night deepens around you, let the gentle cadence of these stories settle like soft moss beneath your thoughts. Imagine the warmth of the fire fading to a cozy glow, the voices around you a comforting murmur weaving through the cool night air. Know that these tales, carried through countless generations, have wrapped themselves around your mind like a gentle shawl, guiding you softly toward rest. Feel your body relax, each breath slower and lighter, as the story's echoes fade into peaceful silence. The stars outside your window shine steadily, silent guardians watching over your sleep, while the world quietly breathes with you. Whatever dreams await are part of this vast, unfolding tapestry of stories, an endless night filled with whispers and wonder. Rest now, wrapped in the calm embrace of history's gentle storytelling, and let sleep come easily, carrying you onward through the soft rhythms of night.